gone by, the British would often amuse themselves by playing some pretty barbaric, let's say, sports involving animals. Now, one of the most common sports is baiting, and if you don't know what this is, it's just putting an animal into a pit with one dog or a group of dogs. And over the years, there have been some strange animals that have found their way into the pits. Bears were some of the most common animals to find their way into the pit, and bear baiting was popular amongst some of the royals. For instance, Henry VIII built a bear pit in Whitehall, and in South London on the banks of the Thames, there were two large amphitheatres dedicated solely to bear baiting, and these were near Shakespeare's Globe. So Shakespeare even included one famous bear, apparently, in his play The Merry Wives of Windsor. But there was also monkey baiting, which seems to have emerged in the late 18th century, and by the early 19th century, one monkey named Jacko Macaco achieved quite a bit of fame after defeating 14 dogs. But thanks to newspaper reports, we know that he lost his last fight to a dog named Puss, and although Jacko managed to bite the dog's neck, or at least lacerate the dog's neck, Jacko ended up having his jaw knocked off. And in the 19th century, there were a couple of reports of human baiting within England. For instance, in 1874, there was a man named Brummie, who was a dwarf, that fought a pit bull. And surprisingly, he managed to win. Although the dog continuously bit the man's arm, Brummie managed to just punch at the dog so many times that he eventually knocked the dog out. Otherwise, there is cock throwing. Now, this was a very simple game that just involved throwing weighted sticks at a rooster who had been tied to a post. And it again had some very influential players. For instance, Sir Thomas More allegedly played the game when he was a boy. But it did feature in Hogarth's image the first stage of cruelty. But keeping with Hogarth's image just quickly, you will also see boys laughing as cats had their tails tied to a post and one cat flying out of a window with bladders attached to its back. Now, these images helped change public opinion in a way, but they also were produced at a time when public opinion towards animal welfare were changing. For instance, in 1822, the Cruel Treatment of Cattle Act was passed, and this was one of the world's first animal welfare laws. Well, in fact, in 1635, Thomas Wentford passed a law that banned pulling wool off sheep and tying ploughs to a horse's tail. And Cromwell banned a lot of blood sports, but he also banned Christmas and stuff like that. But anyway, it seems that, regardless of these sports, Britain has somewhat led the way in animal welfare laws. And just to end off, there was fox tossing. Now, this was a sport in which two people would try to throw a fox up into the air using a sheet. And it was popular amongst a lot of the aristocracy, who would sometimes get dressed up in fancy dress to take part, but it was popular across Europe, and many monarchs even took part. For instance, Augustus II the Strong of Poland organised huge fox tossing events and would even take part in them himself.